Hey, it's Jared. Today I wanted to share my experiences with all of you of the Asus 42-inch Rogue Swift monitor. Now, this thing is a beast. It's a large monitor, and if you've been around on this channel for a while, you know that I have a few other videos where I've looked at LG's larger monitors that are typically TVs, but people have been using them as computer monitors. I've been chasing that larger display existence. I want more screen real estate, but I have some reservations. And so I'm going to talk about this more from a usability experience, more so than its features, because it is a top-notch display. It's 41.5 inches. It's a 16:9 aspect ratio OLED panel with multiple HDMI ports, and it is built like a TV, but the features of a monitor for your computer, which makes it fantastic. It's 4K UHD with 3840 by 2160 at 138 Hertz, which all of these things are great. Like, the resolution is what I need. The refresh rate is more than I'm used to, which is great as well. It's G-Sync compatible. It's got a fantastic refresh rate and a 135,000 to 1 static contrast ratio, which is great, and 450 nits of brightness. It is everything that I need in a display, but it's large. So let's talk about how I've used this display over the last 30 days that I've been using it as my standalone desktop computer monitor. So most of the time I spend my day working on client tasks and editing video for my own projects, sometimes for client projects as well. One of the things that is a challenge on smaller displays, for example, a 27-inch display, which is pretty much the common standard that most creative people will have, is around a 27, maybe a 32-inch monitor. And I've been on a 27-inch Apple Studio display since the Apple Studio display first came out. And that has been good. It helps me keep focused by only having enough room, really, for me to go full screen on apps. If I'm editing video, full screen on a 27-inch is kind of a must, because while I would like 32-inch of usable space, 27 is small, and I'm just not going to spend that kind of money on a 32-inch Apple XDR display. So when Asus came out with this device, I thought, wow, okay, this is going to solve the problem that I had with the LG TV when connecting it to a Mac, not being able to get 60 Hertz, even though 60 Hertz is what was displayed, and having issues with laggy mouse and all of that stuff. Now, I've looked through all the comments in that video, and there are people who give their recommendations, but I've tried all of those things, and I've actually gone tired of responding to those comments, because connected to a MacBook Pro or even connected to a dock, you simply cannot get rid of that laggy mouse situation unless you keep the display to your laptop open. And I don't want that. When I'm connected at my computer station, I want to have my laptop closed and connected, and I want to have good results. With the Asus Rogue Swift display, I absolutely get that. I've had no issues from the moment that I connected that display. There's also some really neat features of the display that make it super useful for being in a desktop environment. For example, on the very top of that display, having a 1/4-20 mount so that you can mount a proper camera to the top of your monitor. This is something where, when we use webcams and whatnot, like, webcams are great, but they're low resolution and just not that great of a camera. Those tend to clip on to a monitor. That's what they're designed for. But if you're wanting to mount a camera and maybe use a sit-stand desk that goes up and down, then you're looking at multiple arms and mounting points for the different peripherals that you've got attached on your desk. Attaching a camera to the top of the monitor, absolutely fantastic. There's also a USB Type A port on the top of the display that allows you to easily plug things in. Currently, I have a light bar on top of my monitor, and I'm powering it by plugging it into the top of the monitor. Absolutely fantastic, because I don't even have to turn the light off. When I turn my monitor off, it also turns the light off, which is an excellent added bonus. So there's also additional ports over the monitor on the bottom and now the side of the monitor for attaching additional devices. One of the things that is a bummer in using this display in an Apple environment is that it doesn't have any USB Type-C, but it does have a built-in hub, so I can go USB-A, plug that into the back of the desktop hub that I use, and then have USB Type A ports all over that monitor that I can use for further expansion. So I'm glad that it has that. It just doesn't have USB Type C, and I really have been moving over towards USB Type C devices. Most of my devices all are USB Type C, and most of the cables that I have around are USB Type C to USB Type C cables, and so a little frustration out of the fact that this monitor that was released here in 2022 has no USB Type-C support, but adapters are easy and cheap to purchase and not the end of the world there. So as far as the performance of the display, this display is absolutely fantastic. It's one of the best displays that I've ever had, just as far as color clarity, it's just a great display for doing creative work. I've done a little bit of light gaming with it connected to the Mac, but, Macs aren't the best at gaming, and so there were, some issues that I had there were more just Mac-related issues. However, I do have a PC tower that I built a number of years ago. It's a Threadripper build. It has a GTX 1080 Ti in it and 128 gigs of RAM, so it's capable of still playing games today. And I did connect it to the display to play a few games and also spend a little bit of time in Microsoft Flight Simulator, because having that additional screen real estate definitely was nice when you can see the monitor that I'm used to behind me for spending time in Flight Sim is much smaller. So that was absolutely fantastic. Is it enough for me to keep the monitor and want to spend all of my time on that monitor? That's what we're going to get into next. Now, with this display, it has multiple HDMI ports, so I can connect multiple devices to it. I had my laptop, the PC, and I also brought over the Nintendo Switch, and then also connected my son's Xbox to it for a little while. And all of these devices can be connected at once, which is great. I have two HDMI 2.1 ports, which are the faster, better HDMI ports for connecting to PCs and all of that stuff. The regular 2.0 ports were great for things like the Switch and even for the Xbox. So being able to connect all those devices is great. Having a remote control so I can switch those devices easily is great, because when you're in gaming mode, you might be backed a little bit away from your monitor. You don't want to have to get up and use the buttons underneath the monitor to toggle through. So using the remote for things like that and volume, absolutely fantastic. Now, the monitor is big and heavy. I have an arm that I was planning on mounting the monitor on, but the arm with the adapters and all of that stuff wasn't really going to save me a lot of space. With this monitor, it does stick out from the wall a little bit just because of the support that it needs in order to keep itself from toppling over. Mounting it to an arm is possible using a heavier duty arm like an Ergotron arm. That's the one that I have that I plan to mount this monitor to, and I'll link to that one down below. It can handle monitors up into the 50-pound range and is fully adjustable and can handle a monitor of this size. You just simply have to get adapters so that you can go from the standard VESA mount to a larger, I think it's 300 millimeter bolt pattern, which I will link to the adapter that I got down below so that you can check that out. But the problem that I'm dancing around right now is this monitor too large for me? Is it too large for what I need? I tend to end up just putting windows in the middle, and I have other applications opened up in the extra screen real estate, which sometimes can be a distraction for me. So I decided I needed to give myself some time, because where I was going full screen with applications, not having any distractions, now I have essentially a full screen sized application like a 27-inch monitor, but then I also have all this additional screen real estate for things like my task manager, for Apple Messages, for Signal, and other applications out there. And having all of those things up and available is a lot of additional information, and I don't know necessarily if that works for me and keeping myself on task and productive. So I've spent a lot of time these last 4 weeks really trying to figure out, am I just using one 27-inch monitor with a whole bunch of real estate that I'm not using, or is having that additional information useful? What I've come to is that it depends. When I'm working on researching a project and I have a browser opened and I have a note-taking app opened and maybe a couple of other things that are off to the side that I still want to be able to see because I'm going back and forth between those things, having everything on the same display is nice without having to do swipe gestures and move between apps and move between tabs and this and that. I can have a lot of things open because I have so much screen real estate. But that's not how I spend the majority of my time. When I'm editing video, at first it was really cool to have all of that additional screen real estate, but I found myself whipping my head back and forth multiple times throughout a project, doing that a lot and actually just feeling kind of sore and almost had a low-level headache just from having to move my head around so much when normally I'm just used to looking straight on. And so I don't know, maybe spending more time doing that, I would get used to it. Maybe what I need to do is be able to back away from my display a little bit more, but then that's going to require a deeper desk. And so I think that there's a way to make all of that work and have it make sense. But in the workspace that I have, maybe 42 inches is a little too large of a display. So as I started doing other projects and looking into what would be the most productive way using a big display like that, I found myself still wanting to have less distraction. And with a 42-inch display and not wanting to whip my head all around because I'm going full screen, I find myself using around 27 to 32 inches of that display for a full screen or what was a full screen view for me on a different type of monitor. And so I think there's a reason why there are not a ton of larger monitors like that on the market. It's because it doesn't really make sense for most people. So would it make more sense if this monitor was an ultra wide, it was shorter and it was an ultra wide? I don't know. I've used multiple of those monitors in the past and I still feel like I'm whipping my head around back and forth trying to get to the information. And when you're editing video and you're constantly in the timeline and you're going from the assets and putting them into the timeline and you're going into the effects and you're going all over your screen, whipping your head around and following the mouse around and also losing your mouse half the time because you've got so much screen real estate, those things are a little bit frustrating and perhaps slow down my productivity because of all of that extra space. So where the space is great is when I am viewing content, when I'm taking a little bit of time to play a game, when I am trying not to be productive but actually relaxing. The bigger display is absolutely fantastic. And that is typical across the board. I mean, if we're wanting to sit back and watch a movie, if we're wanting to sit back and watch and play a game, we can lean back a little bit more, have a larger display, and really feel like we're immersed because of that larger display. Whereas with a smaller display, we have to stay relatively close to it to still feel somewhat immersed in that experience. So for me, I think the larger display is definitely beneficial in some aspects. So the final decision that I had to make with this display is having all of that screen real estate, even though I'm not utilizing it, worth it because sometimes I may want to utilize it. It's like having a 4x4 vehicle but not living out in the country. You want that 4x4 so that when you do go out into the country, you have the ability to get yourself safe and through different areas that you might get stuck in if you only had two-wheel drive. But if all you have is a two-wheel drive, then you're just not going to be able to go places out of fear of getting stuck. So with that larger monitor, I'm looking at it in that way. And I think for me, I'm probably going to end up going back to a smaller monitor just because I don't need that extra screen real estate all the time. And I don't need all of those applications out there that I don't want to be utilizing because maybe they end up becoming a distraction to me. So while this is one of the best monitors in its class as far as size and features go, it really is only going to be useful if you need that much screen real estate. Other than that, there are many other great options, especially even from Asus, that are smaller, that run with the same specs, even better specs, but with this 42-inch display. And then, of course, they have that 48-inch display as well with the same model, just larger. That really is going to be for the gamer. This is not necessarily a productivity toolkit for somebody that is looking to be extra productive unless you utilize multiple tools. I do know a programmer friend of mine who spends a lot of time writing code and has multiple dashboards and things up at the same time. And for him, a large display helps because he has all of the tools up that he needs and has a lot of extra screen real estate for them. For somebody like me, I don't want to be whipping my head around all the time, going from one end of my monitor to the other. I find myself just using a little sliver of the monitor in the middle, and to me, that's a lot of wasted space, and especially on my desk, a lot of area that's taken up by a larger monitor. So I need to find something that is more applicable for my needs than this large monitor. So with that said, the Asus ROG Swift 42-inch display, OLED, absolutely fantastic display, best in class, and definitely would be something that I would be keeping if I was more into gaming and also you needed to utilize more of that screen real estate. However, I do fear that the moment that I get rid of this monitor and send it on its way, that I'm going to regret having done so. So make sure to follow along, because if that happens, I'll definitely be sharing that on Instagram and Twitter. So make sure to follow me there. So with that, I've got links to this display down in the description below. Make sure to check it out for pricing and availability. If you have any questions that I didn't answer in this video, I'll do my best to answer those down in the comment section below. But that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you back in another one soon. Take care.